Will Flanders is standing by from the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty to talk about, well, let's just call it clarifying a new dashboard that you can look things up on that's quite clarifying. Good to have you on the program, Will. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, good afternoon. Clarifying is absolutely the overall goal.
Yes, it's clarifying. I would like to thank the Homesteader Store for sponsoring our hotline. Homesteader Store, good people with the right stuff. Kubota, LS Tractor, and Cub Cadet. So what is this dashboard? What is it meant to do?
Yeah, so we think that, a lot of folks across the state, when you ask them, how much are we spending, do you think, in Madison Metropolitan? How much are we spending in whatever school district X? Most people have no idea. They might tell you something like $5,000. They might say $8,000. And when you ask folks, and how well are kids doing in those districts? A lot of folks will say, well, I think our kids are doing great. They come home and they tell me they had a good time at school. And we all know through the course of the pandemic that changed to some extent, but there's still a lot of misconceptions out there. And so what we're trying to do with this dashboard is put all the information that you can get from DPI, that a lot of it they try to hide as best they can, put it all into one place so folks can really clearly see in every district in the state how much schools are spending and what they're doing with that money.
So let's look at the two school districts that we always pay attention to, Madison, Milwaukee. Proficiency rates are sub 40% in Madison in math and English language arts, and yet Madison meets expectations according to DPI. How's that possible? When 60% of kids are not proficient, how does that meet expectations?
Yeah, it's one of the crazier things that I think is one of the first takeaways people get from this report card data is you see districts with 30 and 40% proficiency rates that are meeting or in some cases even exceeding expectations on the state report card. The reality is the state report card makes so many adjustments for sort of the economic status of students that we really are pushing what George Bush, and I know we don't all love him these days, but what he used to call the soft bigotry of low expectations. And we see that across the board with our report card. A district like Madison will have low proficiency or will have meets expectations at this level of proficiency. Some other district with the same proficiency will be in a different category. And it all goes back to the way the report card sort of games the system. All
right. I'm shocked by this, that they can meet expectations. If you look at Milwaukee, we're talking about, 15% of students meet or are proficient. 15? Is that right?
That's absolutely right. This year, and by some metrics, that's actually an increase over last year. By the way, we looked at it here from the report card. It's even further down than the COVID year. And finally, that was enough to push them into meet few expectations. So essentially, they're still a two-star school. They're not in the lowest category with 15% proficiency rates. And by the way, over $14,600 per kid in just state and local funding. And in Madison, we're up to $17,000 per student in just state and local funding. When you add federal money on top of that, these numbers are even larger. It sort of reflects that the report card is not doing a good job reflecting the proficiency we're actually seeing across the state.
Okay, so what does the average private school charge in tuition? Do you know?
So the average private school that's fully private is quite a bit lower. I don't think we have those figures officially, but a lot of them are in the $5,000 to $8,000 range. Our voucher amount in the state is less than $9,000 per student, even at the high school level. At the K through 8 level, it's $8,300 per student. So significantly lower than any of the public schools that we're seeing here.
All right. So and at the private schools that charge $8,000, $5,000 to $8,000, are they seeing 40% proficiency at the high end or 15% proficiency at the low end?
Yeah, I think the answer is unequivocally not. We don't have the data for fully private schools because those are fully private schools. That's their information to keep to themselves. But for schools that participate in the choice program, we almost across the board, I can't say there are no exceptions, but on average see much higher proficiency rates. And they're doing it for a much lower cost as you're sort of leaning towards there.
By the way, you can just click around. You can look at school districts and just click around on this dashboard. Just simply select the school district and all of the information pops up for you. We also learn that enrollment is down. Costs are up. Per pupil spending is up. But enrollment has been declining. So what you would think is that, all right, you've got fewer kids, you can spend more time and attention on these children. You would, and this is what they say, you're reducing the student-teacher ratio. So why wouldn't that necessarily result in better outcomes here? Because that's what everybody tells us.
Yeah, it's really staggering the decline in enrollment we've seen since the pandemic. In Madison, there's been about a 1,500 student drop across since 2015. In Milwaukee, it's even much larger. We've seen about a drop below 70,000. So we were at 75,000 in 2015. Now we're down below 70,000 for the first time since we've been looking at it. And what this, to me, is reflective of is that even, without universal school choice that we're pushing for, parents are voting with their feet and they're choosing other alternatives. You can't just say part of this is we're seeing declining, population growth, but there was such a dramatic decline once parents saw what was going on in their schools, and it's never come back. Parents have not returned to the public schools because they see this data or they hear from their kids or they hear about the CRT and things that are going on in schools, and they're not coming back.
Yeah, I think that one of the more important things to say is that, look, you think your kid's school district's okay? Probably not. Probably not. Do we have school districts in Wisconsin that are at the 90% level or the 80% level of students who are proficient? Mind you, we've reduced what it means to be proficient. So do we have, a huge amount of high or even a substantial amount of high performing schools that have 80, 90% proficiency?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So on the high end, I think we see districts that are around 60% proficiency. And that's the highest you get. So even in the best districts in the state, we're failing 30 to 40% of kids in terms of getting them to a level of proficiency.
Well, what's happening?
That'll let them.
What's happening?
Yeah, so, it's a good question. I think the biggest reality that you can get from this data is that spending more money is not the answer. As you said, we see spending going up across the board and proficiency going down. They're going in opposite directions. I think we need to look for our choice in charter sector, and some of that is not replicable in a public school, but some of it is. I think what you see there is you see educators who are focused on teaching. You see teachers who are able to instill moral values, and maybe in a public school we can't go all the way with that, but there's obviously a lot that can be done in terms of discipline. I think we discussed that a couple weeks ago, where schools where there's no discipline and kids can get away with essentially doing whatever they want. There's no learning that takes place in a chaotic environment like that. So. There are many different factors, and it's hard to identify one, but hopefully with something like this dashboard, folks can look in their own school district, and that's where we're going to see changes, is at the local level.
What does DPI say? What does DPI say when they say, meets expectations? Surely that's got to have some kind of definition. What does it mean when a school meets expectations? It's not, is it just something that someone, rule of thumb, takes a flyer on? What does it mean for a school to meet expectations?
Yeah, ideally it would mean that students are achieving up to sort of what's expected at their grade level. But again, with the way that we game the system in the report card, and it's a complex mathematical formula, but essentially what they're doing is if you're a school with a lot of low-income kids, the standards are much lower for meeting expectations. That's how we saw Milwaukee meeting expectations last year with less than 10% proficiency. So we have this slider in place where schools are judged differently based on how many low-income kids they have, and that's how you get these results. There could be some metric in there that's, accounting for economic status. We recognize kids come from a different place, but it shouldn't be the fact that you can have this low level of achievement and meet expectations. That's inexcusable and shouldn't happen.
Right. So, if you want to have some kind of analysis done on the challenges that specific bodies of students would face, then that's fine. But why? It seems to me that it's 60% is the best performing schools in Wisconsin. It's 60%. And by the way, that's not Madison. That's not Milwaukee. Why would you not just say everybody's failing? 60% is a D. At least it used to be a D when I was in school. 60% is eking by. It is barely getting by. And somehow, the answer is another $1 billion in education funding, an end to school choice, a reduction that is already plenty of roadblocks in place to open enrollment, and making it even less likely that parents could escape what is obviously failure across the board.
Yeah, what you see from this more clearly than anything else is that the public school establishment, the public school bureaucracy, is not focused on student achievement. They're focused on the people that they think they work for. And it's not you and I, it's the teachers union. And so their knee-jerk reaction to everything is more money. There's never any solutions beyond that. The governor's budget with $2.6 billion in new public school spending is reflective of where he sees his bread being buttered. and it's not improving proficiency. There's no urgency in fixing these issues. It's just throw more money at the problem, and maybe someday it'll go away. We know through years and years of data that's absolutely not happening. It's only getting worse.
And you have got a governor who just demanded more money for public education. You are potentially looking at a flip in power on the Wisconsin Supreme Court that could force the districts to pay more money, especially the wealthier districts to pay more money to failure like Milwaukee or Madison is actually considered a somewhat of a wealthier district, but to pay more money, the idea that we could have school choice if something like that happens, pretty slim if we lose the Supreme Court. I just want to remind people that all roads lead back to the Wisconsin Supreme Court. Thanks very much for joining me on the program. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Have a great afternoon.
You as well, Will Flanders. You can just sit and click through here. Let's find one here. Let's just go to, all right. Now, of course, my computer is failing. I'm looking at proficiency. Ooh, we're barely above proficiency in DeForest. Just barely above 40% in a school district that was considered to be superior to the ones around it. Let's see, which one do we want to find here? Hang on, let's see. Let's go here to, all righty, hold on. Ooh, just barely above 40% proficiency for Verona, too. They love to advertise themselves as an awesome school district. No, you suck as well. Anything around Dane County that I seem to be clicking in, all about the same level of pathetic failure.